our first presenter. We have Brandon Chicotsky. He is from Texas Christian University, and he's going to be speaking with us today on how to teach students the impact of customer personas. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here and also to be part of the Stukent experience. I can tell you all that I've used Stukent products now for several years, and they're outstanding. It goes from and the experience that you're seeing today with everybody's attentiveness and and functions for students, experience for the professor in providing our content. Just want to do a quick check that my screen is shared, that you're able to see everything from my end here. I'm assuming so. And actually what I'll do is I'll open up the chat thread in a separate box. Allow me to
and you're good,
parse through some of the tabs. It'll take just about 30 seconds for everything to reorganize. I'm sorry? Here we go, share. Unfortunately, there's a slight holdup, but here's what I'll do. I'll begin working through my presentation while I troubleshoot on my end. It looks like I have to enable my security systems, so I apologize for any holdup there. It's weird, on the test I had no issue. So just allow me one more minute to do that. I've done everything on the tab, so I have to actually go into my settings, which is a little unfortunate.
Brandon, while you're doing that, I'll just jump in and while you're getting that fixed, and we'll just work with some of the people here, and just thank you once again for joining us. Let us know if the streaming gets fixed. And you're able to see, I can see your slides on there, and it looks like your screen is a little better now. So just let us know when you're ready.
Awesome. And it looks like, yeah, it looks like my security settings still won't permit. You said you have slide access, and I can dictate perhaps for you to share through.
Okay. Yeah, we've got those up, and you should just be able to scroll at the bottom.
Great. With that, let's proceed. Thank you so much for the backup there. I'm so glad that this is really a good use or test case for how Stukent handles troubleshooting and responsiveness. Just awesome. We'll begin. So this is content provided by Stukent. They give slides along with their textbook, and they of course have simulation product and other really helpful materials. And the way I begin with customer personas is to first define what it is in the context of marketing and in business. These definitions that are provided by the textbook are tremendously helpful, and they also give a sense of definitional or rudimentary training for students. And as we work through, we can begin to build categories for a customer persona that help students understand that they, in their customer experience, have been targeted in advertising. One of the first exercises or ideas that I can provide you is for students to begin to put themselves in a customer persona category, where they can determine their geographic, demographic, and psychographic makeup. They can work through their customer decision journey in the day of the life. They can start to identify pain points that might prompt product research or search activity or scrolls, whatever media channel they're engaged. And what I often do is break students up into a design thinking format where I have them whiteboard, often digitally, so they'll be put into digital breakout rooms. And then on a live chat thread like Discord or Slack, whatever catalyst we use, they're going to then create categories and write-ups. And then I call on students or teams Socratically to give feedback as to how they identified themselves or their team's overall demographic makeup and persona attributes. And when they do this, they begin to conceptualize how other demographics and psychographic detail can be described and mapped out. This is one of the maps that you'll find in one of Stukent's textbooks and slide offerings, and it gives just a templatized, simple approach. So then what I like to do is show students the review, and the debrief. And I often pass a mic around the room. I have a 100-person class. Actually, I have two of them every semester, so 200 students that take a marketing management class with me. And what they do is they begin to reflect on their propensities and the unawareness they had prior as to the numbers floating above their head for a likelihood to buy something that makes them susceptible to targeting, which is actually a good thing and healthy for business. And then they can begin in that dialogic exchange in review to understand how they could target other communities and create constructive business and marketing campaigns. I then show students examples of personas. And these customer personas or buyer personas are often ways that students can begin to understand how to create biographic markers, attribute signal, and any kind of categories that enable students to understand more of who they could target and why. There was a question that just came in from Jim about which textbook I've used. I've actually used, I think now, 4 different Stukent textbooks. When I teach digital marketing analytics, I use the named book for that. There's a marketing management book that's new for Stukent that is really good. And I've also used model principles of marketing, which is, I think, called Models and Principles or something of that. I believe the first term is Models. You'll see in our moderator here, there's actually a picture of the book behind him on the far right of your screen. So I actually recommend that you do look at the textbooks, do a demo, and flip through, and you'll find much of the content there is ready. There's even some assignments that you can use that are turnkey. I'll show you a few more examples of templates or customer persona maps or build outs that I use or show students so that they can understand how to build their own. One of the best ideas or best ways to show impact or give impact for this assignment is to give students a prompt to create their own template. And to do that, they need to first look at 30 different customer persona maps. And these are, say, 5 or 6 or 7 examples that then allow them to emulate or adapt for their own. And of course, we're going to look at a particular sector or a particular product category, whatever it is that we're trying to identify as to a high propensity buyer. Whenever you do this, this is also an opportunity to show representation or to create a persona demographic of interest that maybe is different than your community in class. For example, in my classes, we often have course clients that are international, and that helps our students put their mindset in an international market to understand business and analogous cases from the United States as to what transfers abroad, and then vice versa. By doing that, they become better business people here at home. And whenever looking at a customer persona build out, one of the most important things I've learned is that students have to create almost a backstory, like a script, plotting it in a way, like you're creating a character for a movie so you can understand their customer decision journey. And then ultimately give them an assignment to create a customer map like this and a customer decision journey map. So those are 2 different pathways. There's a third one I'm going to talk about today, which is the brand persona of oneself. So there is what's called a contrast or inverse relationship of constructive principles of buyer persona or consumer persona mapping, which is that you can deconstruct what a buyer persona has, like you're seeing here today on these templates, and then you can also construct one for yourself as to what you want to be professionally positioned. And those attributes can then create relationships as if you are a brand. And I will substantiate that in literature and show examples of how that's done in the classroom. So one of the things to think about when showing these examples of a buyer persona or a customer persona to students is you want to have them relate to a character or to a persona, and then have folks that they know seemingly nothing about or only have maybe a superficial understanding, and then have them dive into those communities and understand their media consumption behavior, their buying pattern and buying behavior, by giving them databases to then find credible, relevant, reputable, and recent citations that substantiate that information. When you have students build out their templates and fill out whatever prompt or assignment you have, you need to make sure that they're creating a separate spreadsheet that offers a formal citation list that qualifies or substantiates each of these categories. I've noticed, been very, very helpful. Thank you so much, Michael, for the acknowledgement there. Another buyer persona template here. One of the things that I like to see is student teams decide what category they want to pursue when building their map. And if, say, for example, someone's favorite brands, like in this case, are Nike and Netflix and Apple or other, then what would that signal as to one's propensity to buy into a boutique brand if that were the aim? So imagine you're a company. A student team then has to own that brand as if they're the company. And you have someone who has a high propensity to like big box established brands. But what signal do we find in there from those other attributes that could lend that buying behavior over into a new category or size of business? Can we create a seamlessness of purchase behavior, so to speak, by tapping into propensities, even though we don't have the same company profile? And you can find that by looking at enough templates and by doing a content analysis with the students to identify what that signal is, they become marketers. In that class, that experiential practice helps them. And one of the things I often do in my classes is have a real business or a course client come in and then explain their problem with their CPG, their consumer product good, or whatever prompt they have in the market, so that they can then give the class something real to exercise on, something real to explore. And as they're solving that challenge, they're not only contributing to a business that's coming in, likely represented by an alumni, they're working interpersonally with that company in class. They're also breaking out into those design team structures, collaborating, coming up with a marketing map, substantiating those insights with relevant, recent, reputable citations, using databases to find that information, and ultimately coming up with a learning and ruminating process that enables them to synthesize and internalize what a buyer persona really is. So this is kind of the dynamic of the class. This is really based on a methodology pedagogically called situated learning, where I give students a challenge or a situation that's real in the market. I show them content or an example like I just did with you. I then give them the specific directions that they must take on. They need to begin planning and organizing with me right there instructing, and then break out. And then I go around the room and I coach. It's essentially flipping the class. They have come to class also often having read the Stukent chapter, having completed either a simulation or a chapter end of chapters exercise. And then in class, I give a little bit of review, just like I showed you by definition, and then have a discussion. So everyone has this kind of dialogic learning. They've had the reading learning, they've had the assignment and individual approach learning. And now in class, we're going into workshop and going into that flip situated learning approach. Another thing that I like to see in my pedagogical outcome is a relationship building and also a learning associated with that relationship. So when students see each other from my class in the hallways, I've noticed they begin talking about what we do in class because it's so episodic compared to everything else they do in their student learning experience or in their student life. Our classes are so dynamic and high energy and fast moving that the moments that we take to just stop and think often lead to epiphany, and you can see students lift up, their facial expressions move. And the dynamism that I'm talking about is not just the process I described, but sometimes stillness, where I give everyone 2 or 3 minutes to put everything down, close their laptops, and just close their eyes and think. And I ask them to even clear their head if they need a meditative break. And often what happens is that synthesis takes place. Then they break off into their teams. And when they go in, there's often a low hum of focus and a kind of intention building and goal setting, rather than an opportunity to cathartically socialize, which is what happens if you don't give students that dynamic break or give people an opportunity to ruminate deeply and then go into workflow. So there's this kind of breakdown and acronym here for the SCORE model, and you'll notice that I emphasize the bottom, but what we ultimately find in the pedagogy literature is that there are multiple stages of learning that can really help when going into the experiential form. Another way that you can take this on, and this will really help you with your department chairs, and also if anyone's a course lead like I am, which is to determine for 1,000 students in other classes, and which would involve 2 or 3 other instructors, what methodologies are most effective. You want to create learning measures. Of course, we have our surveys at the end of class, but there are also ways that you can test or ask students how they're growing, and then watch and observe. And in that pseudo-ethnographic and kind of observational study and participant observational study approach, we can add anecdote as professors. And there's also testing and scoring and other things that you can do. I don't give tests personally. I don't find that healthy in marketing because it doesn't transfer well into our industry practice. Instead, we do course client project work, and we have the stage grading through the Stukent products, which is really great. So here's one assignment that I found really helpful as a kind of learning lead up to some of the end of mid-semester or in-semester approaches that we have, which is more design thinking. Though I've noticed as I move design thinking exercises closer to the front of class as to the schedule, and then do it throughout the semester, that has also been effective. So I might start regularly having them. So live chat prompts. So with a live chat prompt, you're going to want something in your class where students are actively engaged together in either a team structure where you can monitor, or as a full class where it's kind of a beautiful mess. I use Discord, which is where a lot of students in gaming and crypto trading often are at. And it's also a great secondary market community where you find people trading shoes and things like that. So you'll have sneakerheads, and it's just really a kind of a generational savvy technology I've noticed as to its alignment with propensity users. And then there's also Slack, GroupMe if you want to use the mobile device, though Discord and Slack are also mobile compatible. They have desktop application too. And of course, there's the URL access. So with those 3 touch points for me, I'm typically sold on Discord or Slack. I then show a video or multiple videos. And then in the live chat thread, I have students begin to identify customer persona targets or attributes of particular customer personas that might apply to the marketing campaigns or the videos. I'll give you an example. So here is a video. We can't play it, unfortunately, because the troubleshooting issue I had on my end. But what I will do, and this is actually just fine, on this slide is a YouTube video that collected 10 examples, or really it's like 20 or 30 examples if I'm not mistaken, that had counting metrics or social listening data and marketing outcome data that first showed what the campaigns are, how they were effective, and then what data and measures were at the end of them. And then while I play this video, I often put, say, 5 or 10 minutes of fluid play. Everyone is required to start putting answers to the prompts. What customer persona would be targeted? Who would have the highest propensity? Provide one reputable citation. What attributes would that persona have regarding purchase power, or regarding media consumption, or regarding brand associations, or network and peer-to-peer relationships and those things. And so as people begin answering prompts, you find this dynamic space in the digital world while students are still watching something in class, and it's silent. It's almost like a silent rave, as one student described it, but in a learning modality. And I found that to be rewarding to think about, exciting to think about. Here's another exercise regarding customer personas that has been so much fun to execute. Oh, and yes, please do feel free to ask any questions you'd like in the chat thread. Here's one that came in from Jim. He says, I teach a consumer behavior class that involves both creating buyer personas and a customer decision journey map for a product category of their choice. Very fun. The main shortcomings or challenges I see in the students' work is, one, their buyer personas are focused on personality characteristics versus user and buyer behavior. So to address that, you want to show them examples or templates that they can then fill out, so they know that there are many categories and that each category must be satisfied. And then to satisfy that category, it can't be something they intuit. Rather, it needs to be something that's cited from a recent, relevant, and reputable citation. So you want to give them different databases that they can dive into. Designate those databases, make sure they have free and open access through the library resources, or because it's an open source database that gives them research capability or new ability to go into a database and through search query and filtering have advanced searching and more pinpointed focus. They can then become more discerning as to the criteria of what makes something reputable, and then provide a relevant citation that helps substantiate each of those different categories that you fill out. So if you can templatize for the students and then allow them to build their own template, that often gives them more agency and direction at the same time. The second thing is a lack of supporting data to add credibility to their claims and characteristics. So to give recommendation to that, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give everyone here, looks like all 75 of us and all those who watch this in the recording, which will probably be several hundred, knowing Stukent's community is becoming quite vast. I'm going to give everyone about 20 different databases that you can use that marketers also use in industry practice. I know this because I'm still a marketing advisor. I'm also an angel, and I work with a portfolio of startups that need growth marketing. And these databases are tremendously helpful for giving us use cases or insights from which we can adapt for our particular market or a particular business to grow. As such, students should be able to do the same thing and have familiarity with these databases so that when they go into their early entry position, they're not having to learn something new or interact with a database for the first time. All right, so when we do a media skim, what this means is that students will actually go into a popular press website like Ad Age, Digiday, TechMeme, The Drum, and they go into a marketing website. And in that marketing website, they are looking at use cases, articles, think pieces, and their job is to identify the customer persona that might apply to that coverage, to that story or that article. And in doing so, they're able to. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Ian. In doing so, they're then looking at marketing content, getting familiar with a marketing website that they may never have heard of, and every week I give them a new media skim. And that means they're able to kind of hold the conversation, build the marketing lexicon, go to the happy hours and the conferences, and may not even realize how they have immersed themselves in marketing culture, which of course helps them in the agency work or if they're doing in-house roles after graduation. And then in building a customer persona, they're identifying the problem or the pain point and then the relevant stakeholders that might involve. So a few media skim examples. I'll have students go to some of the more heady pieces where it's more industry macro, and their job is to find the marketing angle. That could be think with Google. Or if it's something that's more of real time where marketers like to self-aggrandize and award each other and award themselves, what's happening with Kane's Line or Ad Week and some of the ad focus and kind of the big scale above the line or big Super Bowl adding or some of the national campaigns. And of course, Ad Week does some really good think pieces too. And then we can get even a little granular. We can go into marketing weeks, use cases or research. And then we even look at Gartner and Forrester and McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte, Goldman. There's so many different insight pieces now that have a marketing and digital or data analytics focus where you can get into some of these things. I'm going to right now share a workshop example of a customer persona exercise that I use or have used and have found it to be fun and a bit interpretive. So students struggle in the right way, in a good way, where I can go around, coach them, help them, and then also you see them working with each other. Feel free to use this. I just shared it in the chat thread. Feel free to adapt it. And if you feel the need to cite me, you're welcome to if nothing changes. Otherwise, make it your own, have fun. Ultimately, I just want to help the Academy be part of the student community and family. And just know that I'm always going to be available to you as an academic colleague to reach out and collaborate anytime if ever needed. And I will also give you my contact information at the end of this. And of course, it's available in the agenda or the speaker itinerary list that we have here today. And on that note, I'd like to recognize that Professor Moritz is coming up. He's my old buddy and colleague from NYU when I was a professor up there before I got to TCU. And so it's just so good to see him and even a few other folks that I recognize from some just being part of the StuKent family. For those attending one of these sessions for the first time or maybe considering using a StuKent product, you're part of something great, but you're also in terms of the product itself and how it can be a turnkey solution and help student learning, but you're also part of a community, which is just awesome. And it's so helpful and it's a great thing to connect with other colleagues. Okay, so here's where we're going to get into something that might lead us to the Simon Sinek principle of leading with why rather than what. And what I mean by that is when a student says, well, why do I need to learn about a customer persona? Why does this matter? Why do I need to do these exercises and breakout teams and workshops and do the readings and do the assignments? What's the point? You can answer it very specifically by saying, one, I want you to be a better marketer, whether you're going to hire or fire marketers, or be one yourself. You have to understand a buyer or customer persona in order to help target and create segmentation understanding. That way you can niche down and then grow in the right way. And then students will get that. They see a pragmatic approach to marketing principles and how it can apply. Then there's the ones that are not majoring in marketing and say, hey, this is just an exercise that doesn't really apply to me. And maybe I might hire or allocate budget to marketing, but I don't need to get so granular. What you can do as a rebuttal, or really as a friendly and kind and caring rebuke to that rejection of this work, is to tell students that by understanding customer personas, they can understand how to build their own brand persona. It's the constructive principles that create this inflection or this contrasting capability. And I want that inverse. I want that approach to identifying external to building internal, and then offering an external productized approach to who you are professionally as how you're positioned to then be a strength for students. And here's what I mean. When a student asks, why does this matter? You can say by understanding brand personas, whether it's a customer or you can then practice on building your own value by positioning yourself online or within companies or on the job market or even within your social schema on campus to become stronger, better, more remunerated. All of these things mean something to students. students. And then as they start to hear this and realize, oh, the constructive principles of identifying and going through workshops on the customer persona can help me build my own brand persona, well, then they start to key in. And while it is a tangential relationship, it is a relationship. And that's substantiated in literature, which I'll show in just a moment. So I give students these 3 bullet considerations, and I give them some of that broader thinking, and then I break it down into an exercise. I say, all right, we've learned about customer personas. You've now looked at 30 different templates. You've now gone through readings and an assignment, and then in class, you've even had a meditative, quiet review and synthesis, and then gone into design groups and created your own personas, and then have even done some consumer decision journey maps. And with all of that, let's make it matter for you. Take all of that new insight and capability and build your professional persona. And then imagine what you'll be in 10 years and construct what those propensities and principles and mission, vision, values are going to be. And how will you position? And how do you want to be perceived and targeted? Who do you want after you, as if you offer value to the market? And so all of a sudden, students begin imagining themselves in firms that pay well and give them spiritual fulfillment and all the things that you would hope your students have when they're building their career. And then you have them imagine what stakeholders are around them and what peer networks they're building. And I've had students come to me after this exercise and tell me that they have fired some of their friends and adopted new ones because they realized that they needed to stratify and begin to build new efficacy, and their ethos have changed or evolved, and they want to be stronger, more capable, more value driven for the market. And I stay neutral in my reaction, but I do notice that this is what happens. And internally, privately, I'm very excited to know that students begin to aspire and pinpoint their capabilities. As such, their brand persona will express that, and they build these professional positions, and they're learning and exercising the constructive principles of identifying buyer and consumer personas all the while. So they start to begin to see the relationships and the alignment factors that involve the persona building and persona identifying. So I've broken it down to these 3 reasons in principle why this matters. I'll give everyone just a moment to digest the subtext here. Okay. Now I offer citation and use cases to further substantiate these reasons or the main implications. But by creating that kind of narrowed down summary, it really helps students focus. All right, this is the reason why it matters. Here are two summations of studies from formal literature to help compel you and some colleagues to treat these principles as relevant to the exercise or the implications or impact of consumer persona and buyer persona exercises, as to how it also matters for the personalized brand building approach. Here are 2 paragraphs I'll let you read. All right. So when students are looking at a consumer persona and then later using those principles and ideas to then construct and envision their own brand persona and positioning in the marketplace, and then how they also want to be perceived as a consumer, they begin to look at what companies or products or things might matter to them later. And this means people who were in my class who maybe weren't interested in high-end suits, all of a sudden are looking at business suits and looking at clothiers. I've seen people start to look at fine pens, or looking at they'll go to Pinterest, I've noticed, and start looking at different boardrooms and begin looking at business culture and business settings. Or maybe you see flat officing inquiries or queries online, and what students begin to chase is really interesting. And they tell me often they become they adapt a new mindset, envisioning 10 years out, living into the persona map that they drew for themselves. And so they begin to understand also how companies and a brand persona is positioned in the marketplace, not just by that consumer interest behavior, but also by perception. So I'll break it down a little bit more simply. The traditional focus of brand or brand equity is to determine that an organization has a certain market share in relationships with their stakeholders, which would be buyers or those in the trading market or whatever it is that applies to the value set of a business. Now, as the LeBron James signatory here or image really represents, is that even without a name, an athlete or someone prominent and famous can have value, just like a company like Nike or Adidas could in its logo. And in those brand associations, I began to test them in some of my marketing practice. So in this last year, I went to the 64th annual Grammys that took place in Vegas. My job was to consult for a private equity group in which I'm an LP that had invested in a company called Binance, which was the lead sponsor for the Grammys. While I was there, my goal was to meet as many influencers as possible to compel them to promote some of our portfolio companies. Of course, we had payment to offer, but we also had a values alignment. And my job was to identify a buyer persona as to followership communities that could be led by influencers. This is a real fun thing for students to map out or conceptualize. Here's me with one of the general partners. This is Tom Series of the Series Warburg Investment Fund. They're mostly a future fund investing in Web3. This is us at the Grammys. I was wearing a boot that had a Texas emblem on the heel. So I was actually leaving Texas imprints on the red carpet, which made me very prideful. All right. So you now know where my loyalties are and where I'm from, just by that indicator. So these are some of the portfolio companies that we represented. And you probably have not heard of any of these, but I promise in the future you will. The market cap of these companies are growing. Web3 is a really interesting and relevant space for many of the students in marketing who like gaming or digital economies of scale or cryptocurrency or other. This is one of the influencers we worked with. This is London Lazarson. He has 9 million followers on TikTok. He just broke 100,000 followers on YouTube, and he's going to be growing that space in the next few months. He's someone who has a unique skill, having managed talent previously as a marketer, working in agency life, and now is representing himself as talent and growing his audience. Together, we built a concept called a Scent House, and this is something I'll be working with my students next year in partnership with Professor Michael Sherrod at TCU Neely School of Business. What we do is we put about 30 influencers in a pop-up hype house or a small mansion. And with those 30 influencers, each of them have about 1 million followers. And together, the aggregate audience of 30 million needs to have a demographic segment alignment. Our job is to get a client that sponsors the class, and then we promote a campaign to a 30 million audience at the end of the semester. Throughout the semester, the students work with me on influencer procurement, on party and event logistics to ensure that the pop-up hype house for one night works, to understand message market fit, to understand consumer persona and the way that we're going to execute our campaign so that every influencer has a conditional factor met, that their message resonates with their audience and creates click-through activation. We then study and review social listening so that we can track the click-through activations in real time and hopefully help the company in conversion. And that's just one exercise of experiential and applied learning that will be in the future, taking the customer persona and the principles of marketing to really to a new level, which is going to be really, really exciting. So I'll show you very quickly. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to skip a bunch of the theory behind brand equity and social and social identity theory and just really all of the concepts that have led to consumer personas that I base much of my teaching as supplement to Stukent and their great products that we offer. So what I can show you in the quick flip through of these slides is that I give students the seminal authors that help them understand the synthesis of a competitive social environment, a competitive brand environment, and then ultimately how that is measured in structural equation or in just outright sales and P&L evaluations as to a company's success. And then I make sure that they understand that the persona, a person, has value. And I substantiate that in literature as much as I do use cases in the market. I then bring them back to history to show them how, look, brand personas of one's constructive principles in terms of building their own value is not a new thing. And as the internet has got weird and sometimes vile and morbid and offensive online in many cases, it ultimately is part of our lived experience and human existence. And as such, we have a data flow. And their job is to map out that journey. And the 4 Ps in the old marketing mix of product, place, price, promotion has evolved to include experience. And I want them to know that. And that the future customer persona may not look like we understand it today, in the interpersonal engagement. It may actually be something that's more in mixed reality. And so they can begin understanding propensities by expressions of avatar or expressions of persona in a digital environment or a mixed environment. And if it's a full metaverse experience or something that's maybe lived through a HoloLens or maybe Google Glasses if they ever come back to it, but more likely going to be a Facebook hardware or a Meta hardware device. They're working with Ray-Ban and a few other companies to create a really interesting metaverse engagement tool in the future, which will have also a mixed reality. We need to understand that the consumer persona and the brand persona and the buyer persona or follower persona, all of these concepts are going to likely have a convergence point, and it's going to be in Web3. And it's now upon us as marketers and those who teach the impact of consumer personas to bring students along into this marketplace where they may not even realize they're participating because they're in gaming or they're in some kind of buying behavior. Awesome. So we did have some mention in the chat thread about the customer decision journey. I do believe it's relevant to the consumer persona, and I show students a reductive or simplified journey map so they can understand how this works. And then once they get the concepts in the same process that I introduce consumer journey, the consumer persona, I also give them this concept too. I bring them from something simple to something more complicated. I have them begin with reading with Stukent and then doing an assignment with Stukent, and then we come to class, we do a review, we do a discussion, and then we have a live chat thread prompt with media where they begin to identify those principles. We then do a kind of rumination and meditative quiet synthesis where everyone just kind of really begins to lock in on what it all means. We then break out into prompts into design thinking. Teams present their work, and then they ultimately come up with these really intricate and incredible journey maps that involve a customer persona. And then they start to realize that the whole goal of a customer lifetime journey and a consumer life lived experience, and then that persona that you identified that participates in all of that, all of a sudden tie together. All the while I make it relevant to them so that they know that they are a brand as well, and that whatever principles they're learning externally for business can be applied internally for their professional pursuits. And so the relevance is there. As for KPIs, we're not going to spend time on this, but I want to do a quick flip through to show you that this is important the whole time. Show students what measures and formulas are relevant in marketing practice, even though they are not going to be tested on it. Introduce the concepts, introduce the formula, give them a breakdown of what's measured. Our job here right now is not necessarily to read every line, but just to know that there's so much that marketers are now evaluating through our dashboards. Most of it is software driven. So when you think of a value of a customer and the ratio between cost per acquisition or churn rate or other, software is providing that metric very quickly for us. It's great, but we need to inform those machines. We need to inform our software. And so I want students to know of that importance, that they become, in a way, digital managers as much as they are these folks that report on information and how that information is relevant. So the tools of the trade is often about marketing stacks, building within the technology scope the best ways to measure, evaluate, follow, and resell or invite stronger relationship behavior for your customers. You have to target and then bring them into that scope. And so building tech stacks becomes a real fun thing for us as part of an end of semester approach. Here's an example of a software list that students in my class will explore for familiarity to understand what these companies are, what their products are, and how they might apply to building a marketing campaign. And then often our students are demoing and eliminating what they determine is not necessary for their budget or for their course client as they're going through these exercises. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to actually, instead of working through my past and my history and some of the things I've done, I just want to give you my contact information. Oh, and as a promise, here are the databases that I have our students dive into. Everything with an asterisk is what our library resources provides for free. And then my classes often have a special relationship because I reach out to these companies every year and mostly just haggle with them to introduce future marketers to their product. And so I have some pretty strong language that I use in terms of compelling them to believe in the talent from TCU. And so far that's proven out well. We have some awesome students that have come through our business school. I hope this list of databases is helpful to you. It's going to be on the recording. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to keep it on the slide too long. This is my contact information, and with that, I think we have a good 4 minutes before I'm off stage.
Thanks, Brandon. That was an awesome presentation. I really liked what you said about the 4 E's of marketing and that addition. That's pretty cool concept there. I know that you were really good about answering questions during the presentation. So there's just the one other question that came up that I have is Jim asked, is this primarily presented as part of Principles of Marketing course or something else?
Yeah, so I teach both graduate and undergraduate level. My first faculty appointment was at Johns Hopkins, and then I held a dual appointment at one of my alma maters at NYU, and that was all graduate. And what I realized is that I had to teach measures, data measures, and so I was using digital marketing analytics textbook for Student, and was using the data measures that I showed you in those kind of quick slides, and that was really more of my emphasis there. But for the marketing management course that I teach at TCU, which is undergraduate, often sophomores, 100-person classes, those for that I use the models of marketing management, or the marketing management book, which is new. So I'll just use kind of an undergraduate level approach, and I don't use as many measures and the assignments. I more just introduce them to students and have them decide which ones would be useful rather than actually measure data. Now, in the digital marketing analytics courses at the graduate level, we often play with a course client's data set, and then the students will interact with the data and apply those measures that hopefully they had been introduced to as an undergrad.
Great. If there's any other questions that anyone has, feel free to enter them in the chat right now. We have just a couple more minutes with Brandon. And then also we have the first of your opportunity to win a prize. So what we're going to do, the way this one works is I'm going to ask a recap question from Brandon's presentation, and the very first person who responds in the chat will win the prize. So everybody get your fingers ready, okay? So here's the question. What does the R in SCORE stand for? So go ahead and, oh, Tracy got it, relationship. So wait. Yeah, Tracy's, no. Sorry, it's Alita who's first, I think. Yes, Alita, congratulations. You got that with relationships. So good job. Brandon, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. I think it's awesome that you went to the Grammys, and I like how you showed the value of the persona and your individual brand, and the imprint of your boot having Texas. That's pretty cool. You left your mark on the Grammys. Way to go.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, and Student's just been a big boost to my pedagogy and to help the students' learning. So thank you.
Thanks again, Brandon. We appreciate you taking time to be with us today for this presentation. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to make a brief announcement regarding an event that Student hosts, and it's called ProfCon. If you have attended any Student webinars or events in the past, you've probably heard of ProfCon. Well, ProfCon is a marketing conference that we do for